Uncle Grayson is using a lighter.
That's right, Uncle. That's right. You're related now.
That's
basically.
right. Our kids will call each other cousin and uncle.
Cousin.
Okay.
Hello, cousin.
So here it is, the inaugural episode of the Bourbonists. Here we go.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers.
To a future that's wide open, boys.
Here we go. So today we're smoking the Tabernacle by Foundation. First impressions?
It's creamier than I thought right off the first puff.
It's, for me, it's all cream and pepper. I'm getting like,
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of barnyard, like peat, hay,
are you?
dirt.
Just a little bit. I
Soil.
get the hay.
Yeah.
I get the hay
But
too.
yeah, very, very earthy
Hey.
notes, very barnyard. It's great. Pepper.
It's one of the best draws I've had on a cigar.
Oh, the draw is perfect.
It's yeah.
That'll work.
Cream and pepper.
It's a fantastic cigar. The body of it has a nice oily feel, kind of leathery.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels almost like a strong wrapper.
Yeah.
Like it's
It's
like, have you ever
constructed well.
held a cigar that like you just feel it and it almost kind of feels like it's gonna crumble in your hands?
Right.
Yet it's like it's a well humidified cigar, but it kind of feels like it's almost kind of like I don't know how to describe it, but like not pasty, but I don't know if you guys have ever had that or if I'm just
Yeah, I don't know if I know what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
Were you saying some cigars they can feel kind of crackly?
it's the wrapper.
Yeah,
I feel like it's the consistency of the wrapper, but it's like
Right.
the binder and the filler, like the tobacco in the actual cigar is well humidified, but
Right. Yeah. This doesn't have that at all. This feels well constructed.
It's a good one. You're smoking that fast. Do you feel that?
No.
Is your head spinning yet?
No.
no, that's a man.
It won't.
You good?
I'm getting all the
It's
smoke
it's
in my
blowing right
face.
in your face, brother.
I know. I'm getting everyone's smoke.
Although I will say that this thing's working because the smoke isn't lingering. It's blowing and then getting sucked back in.
Yeah.
So our
Grayson says otherwise.
Eyes are burning.
this is our first episode, folks. We're not gonna be perfect, but we look perfect. So
That's all that matters.
that's all that freaking matters. Today we are pairing the Tabernacle with one of my favorites, Larceny Barrel Proof.
That's
Oh,
better
actually,
for me at least.
That's better. I can feel it circulating a
Yeah.
little better. Yeah, it's all right.
That'll do it.
That'll do it.
That'll do, donkey.
I was gonna say pig. That'll do, pig.
All right, so I guess the question now is: are we more fans of Babe Pig in the City, or Shrek?
Babe.
Shrek.
Definitely Babe.
Definitely Shrek.
No,
Shrek.
Babe was groundbreaking.
Shrek
the
is one of my-
animals look like they're talking.
This may be because I'm a grown kid, but Shrek is one of my favorite movies to begin with.
It is a great movie.
It's got so many good jokes in it.
Did you just go Scottish? It's got so
It's
many
got
good
so
jokes.
many good
So
jokes.
many good jokes.
Scottish, I don't know.
I like
This
that
is-
boulder. That is a nice boulder.
This is my swamp.
And in the morning, I'm making waffles.
Man, there was some strong gases leaking out of my butt that day.
These are just getting worse and worse as we
No,
go.
I was just quoting something that I regularly say to my wife. Is that in the movie?
No, it's not. Definitely not.
Shrek 3, maybe.
All right. So let's go with the Larceny. This
Goes great with a cigar.
On the nose, I was getting basically pure honey and vanilla.
See, I'm getting a little citrus. And I think that's after smoking a couple times, like couple puffs of the cigar. Like I'm getting honey and citrus.
I was getting caramel.
Oh, it's heavy caramel for me.
Yeah.
Caramel.
I think it's that sweetness. I think
I think you combine honey and vanilla and you get caramel.
probably.
Oh, maybe so.
Yeah. So Grayson's
So
just
we're on
basically
the
saying
same
that his
page.
palate is
We're
more
all right.
sophisticated than
Exactly. You guys pick up the general flavors. I parse it down into
I
the
take
two
it
that combine.
deeper. You guys are still in grade 3. I'm in high school.
You pick up the purple. I pick out the red and the blue. That's what's happening here.
Yeah.
So what are we about? It's the foundation. Let's just talk about why we did this. Like, what does it mean to us?
I think
Yeah, sure, Dan, go first.
Are you thinking, Dan? Let's go. Let's hear it. Today, Junior.
Speak to us.
Speak, boy. It's more of a, like, obviously we love cigars and whiskey, and that's kind of some of the main components. What brought us together.
Yeah.
But I think what ends up making our friendship and our bonds deeper is our love of faith, but it's also our desire to become better men each day. And it's our desire to help each other become better men each day.
Well, and cigars have this wonderful ability to create an atmosphere for depth and contemplation. So it's not just sitting around wasting time, but you have something that's filling all the gaps of the conversation, and that's what the cigar is.
Yeah.
And the whiskey.
Yeah.
And especially for men, I think like women can just get together and be like, all right, let's all hang out and talk. But guys don't ever like text each other and be like, you want to get together and talk?
Right.
But we're all like, hey, you want to get together and try this new bourbon that I got?
Yeah.
Or this cigar that I got?
Right.
And then what happens from that is usually good conversation.
Right.
I wouldn't even say usually. I'd say always.
Yeah.
Right.
I've never had even just the most simplest lack of depth conversations tend to be great ones. Like even if I'm talking to people who don't want to who never really are interested in going deeper in life and aspects of life, like you even have good conversations just on the surface around bourbon and cigars. But I think that's another thing.
Yeah.
Is it's the depth. Like the thing that brought us all together is we know there's so much more to life than just the surface level aspects.
Well, and you're committed to, once you light that cigar, there's a commitment that instantly takes place. There's no instant gratification. Like, with a cigarette, it's short. You're talking about 5-minute break. But with a cigar, you're committing both to that cigar and then to whatever surrounding you're in. So, all right, I'm going to be here for 45 minutes. You could throw your cigar out. Sure, that's cigar abuse.
It's blasphemy.
And we
Yeah,
hate
like
that.
a schmuck. It's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. But there was a wedding I catered at, and there was a professional cigar roller there, and he's like, hand rolling these cigars. I mean, it's a craft, it's an art. And these guys who probably never smoked cigars in their life, they're lighting them up, and then they get maybe halfway, and then just dip them in a drink and walk away from it. Just throw it, they just throw it in the drink and smother it. It's like, what a waste. I mean, that's just a shame. But if you really commit to it, then, with time, I think anything is possible. The conversation is going to go deep at some point.
Yeah.
And in a sense, too, I think cigars always level the playing field.
Yeah.
Right? Like you could have a 70-year-old, someone with a lot of wisdom. You could have a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, everyone in a different place of life, but you're all smoking the cigar. So it's like, you know what? We're all united in this conversation, even though there are a lot of differences between us.
Right.
Absolutely.
I've had some of the greatest, and I most of my childhood and into my, most of my life until I was probably 21 or 22, I fought my dad on everything, and it came to the point where, we started going to Florida together as a family, and I would still wreak havoc, and because he was a military man, and I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm artistic brain, and he's military brain, right? And so. Everything, and I was actually talking to my mom about this the other day, everything he ever wanted to teach me, I ended up being for the better, and I fought him every step of the way. But I started learning that, once we could sit down and have a cigar, the first time we ever sat down and had a cigar together, it was the most mind-blowing thing, because I was like, oh, you do have depth. Oh, wait. You do have more than you need to get this stuff done inside of you. There's depth, there's stories, there's stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was essentially the foundation of not to play on words, but to kind of play on words. It was the foundation of this group. Is we were all sitting around one day, and I think it was just you and I, Dan, at one point, but because I think you guys had tapered off and you went home. But I was like, this is fantastic. I'm talking about stuff that I didn't know I needed to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm talking and I have somebody in front of me who's willing to listen and not judge those things. And I'm not talking. Excuse me.
Well said.
We just had lunch. But
tastes better than
and I'm not. And I'm not talking about, like, you know, here's where I hid the 4 bodies. Like, not like kind of that stuff. But, you know, like stuff like, hey, I've been dealing with this, man. What do you think? And it's good to bounce ideas off of guys like that.
Right.
And I think culturally, I think that we've kind of lost that. It's like the idea of, like, if you have feelings as a man, then you need to be feminine. No.
Right.
That's not true at all. I think if you have feelings, you need to find someone that you trust to talk to them with or talk them through, you know. And there's some things, and my wife is my best friend in the world, but there's some things that, like, she didn't get. If I sit and talk to her, she's like, oh, okay. And she'll understand and be loving about it.
Yeah.
But when I sit and talk to you about it, or I sit and talk to you guys, then I'm like, I feel understood more because you understand it from the aspect of, oh, I'm going through it too. Like, I get that.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like, she'll never understand from a man's perspective dealing with, you know, troubles with your father or troubles growing up or, you know, whatever. She's a different biological makeup. Of course she's going to think differently, you know?
Right.
Well, and I've heard it said before, and we have all these, like, cultural masculine figures right now, like the Andrew Tate types and people like that, where there's almost this attitude of, like, men can't be, like, struggling with anything, you know?
Right.
Which is so not true. But I do think there's some truth to, like, a man can't go to his wife just, like, you know, dumping all his emotional trauma on her in a way that a man should be there for his wife when she needs that.
Right.
Like, a man should go to his wife and be like, I'm struggling with this, but I have a plan for how I'm going to solve it.
Yeah.
Like, he always needs to be the one who's, like, taking charge, making sure there's a plan in place to, you know,
To take
fix
care
whatever
of
the issue is.
Right.
Well, and
But still, that's not to say, like, you can never, like, struggle with these things. Like, if you have emotions, like, you're not being a man. It's like, that's
Well, and
That's
sometimes, from what I've heard, sometimes, like, especially, and this is coming from a single individual talking about marriage, talk about irony, but from what I've heard is that sometimes a woman comes to a man, and it's the same for a man coming to a man, right? When you come to us and you're, like, just bouncing these things that you've been dealing with, a lot of the time you're not even looking for an answer. You're just wanting to be heard, and you're wanting to know that these people who are hearing you are not going to just get up and run away, right? They're going to sit there, they're going to journey with you, and they're going to, because a lot of the times we're not even looking for advice. In fact, a lot of times when I'm, like, spouting off what's going on with me, it kind of irritates me when someone just starts giving me a ton of advice, right? And I think it's a lot of the same with women, right? Like, a woman just wants to know, like, well, first of all, what you're saying isn't going to, like, what they're saying isn't going to set you off, right? So you're kind of, you're kind of that strength. You're that source of strength and consolation. And you're there just to show I'm still here, even though you're not perfect. And I'm still here, and I want to be here. And I think it's important to also, like, if you do have, like, answers, then say, like, I've got answers, but I'm not going to give them to you unless you don't want them.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think learning, too, that there's a time and a place to give advice, and there's also a time and a place to just tell the guy, hey, do you want to go get a beer?
Yeah.
And just listen, because it's so easy to just give advice to everybody, especially when it's unsolicited.
Absolutely.
And there's a need for people just to listen.
There's so much unsolicited opinions out there right now that everybody's just like, well, do I have to get on this train, or I have to get on this train, or do I have to agree with this? Is this bad if I don't agree with this? Like, no. Sometimes you just shut up. Hush, man. Like, just listen to what the guy has to say.
Right.
And it's kind of tying this back into the foundation of why we're doing this podcast. Like, I think everything we just described is a long-winded answer to say, like, we're doing this to help show other men that you are not alone in struggling what you're going through. And essentially what we're doing, at least from what what we've all kind of talked about, is we're here to kind of present, like, okay, well, we're struggling. And maybe if you guys hear kind of some of the things we're struggling with, or some of the things we've heard other people go through, right, then it's to kind of help the listeners and help you guys know that, okay, well, I'm not alone, because that's one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves, that we hear, is that when we're struggling with something, especially as men, right, that first of all, we're alone in dealing with it. and we have to be alone in dealing with it, right? This is just between us. This is just us.
Right.
When a lot of times the best help is when we are willing to be vulnerable and open ourselves up to the right individuals, right? It's important to recognize you don't want to open up to everybody.
Yeah, just to make something clear, don't walk into a bar and be like, I have problems, who wants to listen?
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to go well. You're probably going to be like, hey, wrong bar.
Well, and we all hate the people, like you're checking out at a grocery store and you're like, oh, how's your day going? Oh, terrible. Oh, my dog died. It's like, yeah, wrong time and place.
Dude,
Like, yeah, you should talk about it, but
Listen,
don't throw
man.
it at this random, your customer, you know?
Just trying to be accommodating and just trying to give good customer service. Not a therapist.
Dude,
Right. And then
There's a great Tom Segura bit about that. He talks about it. He's like, hey, I went into the bank, and there's
gosh.
one of those tellers at the bank who just like stands there and doesn't really have a job. He just greets people, and he's like, "How you doing?" And the guy was like, "Well, actually, I'm going to Denver later." And he's like, I just wanted, I'm good, and I can move on.
I didn't need much.
I just
I didn't
wanted
need
a
much,
simple,
man.
good man, how about
It
you?
wasn't a real question.
Yeah. It was almost rhetorical.
I know I said, how are you doing? But that's not really what I meant.
This is how speaking works. Like, I say, "How are you?" You say, "Fine," and I go do what I have to do.
Right.
It's more of a long-winded greeting. All I'm looking is for a little give back, right? Hey, I'm good. How about you?
So,
That's it.
The end.
oh, no, go ahead.
No.
No,
I'm done.
No.
No, I'm good. I don't want to. So, Grayson, you had a great idea earlier of, so how do we all get into cigars? And I think it's because of him. I think Joseph was the one that introduced all of us, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I might have
Not
been.
quite. I mean, he was right at the cusp when I really started to get into cigars.
Oh,
but
nice. So what's that story then?
For me, I want to say it was like probably my junior year in college. I
Really?
started like smoking like, it was more like just like the little like almost cigarillos. And then me and some buddies went camping up in Georgia. We like hiked a mountain. We had like full, like probably like a Toro size cigar. And we like hiked down the mountain smoking those. And I was like,
That's awesome.
this is awesome. But I wasn't like smoking in any sense regularly. Then right after I got married, we moved to Missouri. One of my good friends, Luke, I found out he liked cigars. And then shortly after I met Joe, so I like actually met people who cared about cigars. And that's when I really started to like, all right, now I'm going to get a humidor and I'm going to, start collecting and smoking cigars.
We bonded over cigars.
Oh, yeah.
And whiskey.
Right.
Which is great.
Right.
We got into a great theology discussion. I think was it during Lent? No, it was right before Lent. It was Fat
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
And we sat outside, and that was our second time meeting each other.
And we had a great conversation.
We did.
Just like we said earlier, like
Right,
the cigars help to take away like any like awkward pauses. So you're not like,
right,
because you can't leave too. It's not like,
right,
well, this is getting
It's a
awkward.
commitment.
Like let's
right.
go inside now. It's like, no, we're gonna be out here. So
So
Yeah.
was it at that point that you decided to marry his sister, or was it after that?
I had already.
it was because of me.
you were a big reason why it happened, but
He married Jordan because of me.
Exactly.
right, that's right. I just had to. Yeah.
I'm a narcissist.
Which, so I think, so Grayson, you're 2.5 years into marriage?
Not quite 2.5. A little over 2.
Okay. Dan, you've got
Norton.
I'm
Joseph-
coming up on 2 months.
Yeah.
In 5 days.
Yeah, how's that going?
Great. Marriage is a wonderful thing.
Is it?
It's wonderful.
Is
It's
it-
like a. It's like a
Is
sleepover.
it like a
every
Jimmy
night.
Stewart kind of wonderful, or is it like a?
It's a wonderful life. It's a wonderful life. I
Didn't
love
he
my
try
wife.
to kill himself in the movie?
Well,
Everyone goes through that phase. You know?
Listen, it all hits the fan one time or another.
he got through it.
He did.
Good old
He did.
Clarence saved his life.
He needed the entire town to tell him that he was the richest man
No,
alive, but then he decided not to kill himself.
Actually, though, no, that is a good point though. There's this Chesterton quote about marriage. I think he was writing to his. It couldn't have been his son. He was writing to someone. Yeah. But Chesterton said, like, the moment when you think I'm never going to get through this, like your marriage or whatever, where a lot of people will give up and be like, hey, this must not have been the right person for me. He said, if you push through that moment, you will come out the other side and it will be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Yeah. And there's always going to be those ups and downs. It's learning to like be level-headed through that and not allow the emotions to like take you every which way, because emotions are all over the place and they always will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and acting on emotion is probably one of the worst decisions that anybody could ever make.
Yeah.
That is
Because
true.
some of the worst decisions in history were made on the best intentions.
Right.
And so if you're like, well, I intend well, but I'm also super sad right now.
Yeah.
Then you're like, maybe that decision's not great. You might want to come back to it in a few hours or a few days. Let it in a few days. Don't give it more than a few hours. But
Sleep on it.
sleep. There it is. Yeah, sleep on it. But yeah, I'm coming up on 2.5 years. Yeah, married. Yeah.
2.5 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
2.5.
Good boy.
Yep, it'll be 3. Yeah, 3 in March 6th.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are like, I've been through it 20 years. I don't even know if my wife exists anymore. But that's another thing. It's like we also want to speak to those guys, and it's like it's not. And that snippet right there was awesome. Like right on the other cusp of that fight, right on the other cusp of that disagreement, and you could think that. And I'll be honest, we've had a couple of those. It's like.
Right.
Because every marriage goes through those, and it's not like, oh, we'll only fight like this once, and then no, it's you're learning to live with another person. That's
Right.
and like that's the biblical principle of becoming one person. Is like you no longer live for yourself.
Yeah.
I had somebody who's actually in most of our lives, but I had a good friend of mine, Tom, tell me that once. He was like, "This is not a one-time thing. You're learning to become someone else, because that someone else is who's going to help you through everything.
Right.
That someone else is who's going to be there no matter what. And the reality is if one gives up, then the other has to carry. So you don't give up. You just get through
Right.
that next thing, and you're like, wait a minute, maybe I need to learn to think differently. Maybe the way I've been living isn't right, or it was right for me at the time, or it's the idea of like seasons of life, right? It's maybe
Yeah.
that was right for me when I was single, but
Right.
maybe I don't need to do that. Maybe I need to
Right.
step it up in this area. Maybe, you know what I mean?
Well, and if you go into it with that mindset, you're not expecting it to be easy.
Right.
If you go into marriage or really anything that's worth doing expecting it to be easy, you're going to give up.
Well, and I'll be honest, I grew up with a lot of people like that, because there's so many people. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But like, yeah, there's so many people that I grew up with that were like that, where it was like, well, I'm getting married, so all my problems are going to go away. And you're like, really? I don't think that's how that works.
Have you guys seen I think he's a podcast or it's a YouTube channel. It's like Wrangler Creek School. He's
Yes.
like cowboy hat, big mustache, always
smoking a cigar.
Always
Oh,
smoking
yeah.
a cigar. He had a video on marriage where he was saying, when I got married, my dad gave me this advice where he was like, son, when you hit year 3, I think it was year 3, something like that, you're going to think like, I can't do it anymore. Like, this is too challenging, whatever, I want to give up. He's like, push through that. He's like, and then you'll have like 3 more years where it's like amazing. And then year 9, it will hit you again where you're like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. This is so hard. We're not like, bonding in the same ways that we used to. Like, maybe this isn't right. Maybe I should give up. He's like, push through that year again. And then you'll come out on the other side for 5 more years. It's kind of a continual cycle of that. And, I think, again, like we already talked about that, like just recognizing that's just the reality. Don't expect it to be some Disney movie, like, and they lived happily ever after. They never had a fight. They never, had any disagreements.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think that's beautiful that you say that. And, like, especially, so me, I'm an exercise science major, right? That was what I graduated college with.
Yeah.
And I did it
Show
more
off.
for the bodybuilding perspective. Kind of let myself go a little bit, but happens to the best of us. But
You look great, Dan.
when,
You
thanks.
look great.
Oh, you guys are too kind. But when you guys are working out, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, said this. Now, granted, he was on some stuff, but it's the same whether you're going natural or not. If you want to build muscle, it's when you're in the middle of weightlifting and your body is in your mind is telling you, I can't do another rep. But when you force yourself to do 2 or 3 more reps, right, you push through that moment of, oh, crap, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I've got any more in you or in me. And then you tell yourself, no, all I need is just a couple more. And it's when you do those next 3 or 4 reps, that's when you're actually going to achieve growth. And that was one of the most beautiful things that exercise taught me It's the same as life. It's any part of life. I mean, what's the quote? There's so many dreams that have been given up on a day before it was achieved.
Yeah,
It's
right.
because
Oh my
they
gosh,
get to
yeah.
a certain point and they're like, man, there hasn't been any sort of, I haven't seen any sort of fruits from this. But I've been consistently putting in work when it's like all you needed was one more day.
Yep.
Or one more hour, right? All you need is that consistent push through, and you would have achieved it.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful that it ties in with marriage. It ties in with everything worthwhile in life.
Which is why it's so good to, especially when you're younger, play a sport or, get into weightlifting or some type of physical challenge where you learn. It's not like learn the fundamentals and then you're done with the fundamentals. It's like you always have to constantly be going back to the fundamentals and practice. Like if it's basketball, like practicing dribbling, practicing the jump shot.
And I think that ties
Always, even if you're Steph Curry, you still have to practice.
Oh, that's what he practiced. Him, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, they all practiced the fundamentals for days, for months, for years. Like they're never done practicing fundamentals. And that's beautiful because the fundamentals are what set up the foundation for anything.
Yeah.
Right? It's going back to that foundation of, okay, well, this is what I'm building this dream upon. Mm-hmm. So I need to consistently go back to it to be reshaped, to continue to work on that foundation, right? When you build a house after tens of years, right? A lot of times, especially if it wasn't built too well, you have to go back and redo the foundation or part of the foundation.
Oh man, I'm in real estate and I come up against that all the time. Where people are like, I want to
cracks in the foundation.
Right. I want to go look at a house that's brand new because that's guaranteed that it's not going to have any problems. No, it's not. Within the first 6 months, 95% of the time, all foundation cracks because it has to settle. It has to sit there. There's something in the industry called first year, or it's something like first year blues or something like that, where after you buy it for some reason, like my parents bought a house like 2 years ago. Within the first year, like 4 problems happened. And they're like, what the heck's going on? This house is in perfect condition. It's first year blues. You're living in the house differently than the last person. You're going to unsettle some things. You're moving things around. The air shifts. The space shifts. Like, you're going to come up with some issues that are going to happen. Now, some people are a little more unlucky than others.
Asked himself.
That'll be a good short right there.
Ask yourself.
Turn that into a short.
Ask yourself.
Well, do we want to talk about how we each got into cigars? What was the...
Well, I'm actually
foundation?
interested. I'm actually interested in your story.
Mine?
Yeah, you're going to have the best story for sure.
Oh, I don't know.
Because you
Let's
got
hear
us
that.
into them. I was deep into this stuff before you. But
That's true. You got me more into whiskey. You and my brother-in-law, Cody, shout out Cody, got me into bourbon. Because my brother Daniel got me into Scotch. And that was a big Scotch and Irish, drinker. And then bourbon, my first bourbon that I fell in love with was Eagle Rare.
Oh, of course.
That's funny because that's like
$35
the
a bottle.
opposite of most people, I feel like.
Yeah, I know. Well, Daniel found this great whiskey channel, which the name of it slips my memory. But this guy had, this mustache and this great accent and, and you just want to swirl it around and throw that out, and then pour it again. Anyway, this guy had a great personality. Anyways, but cigars, I just grew up watching old black and white movies. Yeah, it's a weird one. I grew up watching old black and white movies, Western movies. I love John Wayne, the Duke, and then even the way Jimmy Stewart would smoke cigars, and It's a Wonderful Life, the way he lit up that cigar and puffed on it was just beautiful. And seeing John Wayne pull out a stogie and puff on that
right before he saved the world.
right.
That always helps.
I gotta go save this girl. Hold on. All right, now I know how to do it.
John Wayne doesn't really save the girl, but
Inhale cigar.
anyways, there was just such a presence. I was like, because as a young man, you're thinking, okay, what does it look like to be a man? And image is part of it. There is a root to yourself. Part of masculinity, there are roots. Like sometimes I just want to go out and chop wood.
Yeah.
And for me, sometimes I just want to go have a cigar. I'm having a hard time, a rough day. I got stuff to think about. And the cigar at this point just really creates that, that atmosphere for it. But so I grew up watching John Wayne and these black and white movies of people smoking cigars, and it just looked just wonderful. And when I turned 18, it was funny. The first time I had a cigar, I went fishing and it was a horribly hot and muggy morning. I had no breakfast, no water in me, and I go out and I smoke a cigar and I'm fishing, and I got so sick from that cigar. But I had so much fun smoking it and fishing, but I got so sick from it. But I was determined because I really wanted to enjoy cigars, and it just became such a great way to just pull back and relax and contemplate. You know, there was a lot of stuff going on with my family at the time, and cigars just gave me a way of thinking through those things, because there's a huge difference sitting like this in a chair and just kind of moping about everything, and sitting this way in a chair and puffing on a cigar. There's something so simple, it's such a small difference, but you're smoking on something. Guys need to be active. You know, there's something really important about having a ritual and a routine. And there's something, you know, I mean, every couple seconds, you got to puff on that cigar. You got to care for the cigar. And so right there, it automatically takes you away from your, you know, from yourself. You have to care for something else. I love taking care of cigars. Yeah, and then a good friend of mine, Joe Kenny, he really started opening up my mind to, like, getting the notes of a cigar, and it just slowly started building, you know. And then I started, you know, taking cigars with me to different parties, and, you know, I'd always bring 3 or 4 sticks with me and offer them to people, and so 3 or 4 of us would sit around and smoke a cigar, and it just, I just love cigars. Yeah, but it was John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart, and a lot of black and white movies that did it for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was just something you could share with people.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I find it so funny that, like, even a lot of these, like, master blenders in the cigar industry, or people who literally own some of the top name, you know, cigar companies, a lot of them talking about their first experience smoking a cigar, they're like, I got so sick.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I threw up all over the entire room. And it's like, part of you wonders, like, why do we keep coming back to cigars when that happens, you know? But it might even be the fact that it is, like, a challenge, and, like, it requires, like, a balancing act of, like, I want to learn this because it is not just an easy thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
I think that's, yeah. I mean, that's a kind of similar to my first story,
Yeah.
or kind of my growth into, and mine is a little weird. So I went to public high school.
Oh no.
Yeah. And one of my best friends growing up, funny thing was, is we used to smoke paper. We used to straight up just roll paper, light it, and smoke it.
That's weird.
That's great.
Very.
Man. Awesome.
But that's when I fell in love with the
Flavor profile did you get on that?
burnt paper. It was great.
A lot of wood.
That's creepy.
Yeah. But
Smoke. I mean, a lot of
funny
smoke
thing
from-
was, I fell in love with the action of smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my older brother Tim, I remember vividly, we went to Florida and we got a condo for the week. In fact, I think we went to Disney World, so I was like 12 or 13.
Sure.
And he came home with Sweet and Milds.
There you go.
And so we were out on the back patio. We stayed up until like 3:30, 4 in the morning smoking Sweet and Milds. And then my mom came out and we hucked over the Sweet and Milds. And my mom was like, "The hell are you smoking?" And I was like, how did she know? But yeah, we got belittled that next day. But then funny thing was, is the same brother, Tim, we ended up going to our good buddy, and our good buddy's dad is, I don't know if he still is, but he was the president of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. He loves cigars. Like, I'm pretty sure he would have at least one a day, if not 2. Loves cigars. And his son, who is our good buddy, loves cigars. And so I remember I went over to his house because my brother was spending the night, and that was my first time actually smoking a true cigar. First of all, didn't know not to inhale it, so I spent 30 minutes, and it was like, it was either a 6x60 or a Churchill.
Oh,
And
gosh.
the 30 minutes, I was inhaling the whole time, and it was not a
no.
Connecticut either. And so I remember sitting there, and I was like, I feel pretty good. Then 5 minutes later, I was like, I don't feel near as good as I used to. And then 5 minutes later, I was like, I don't feel good at all. And so I stood up, and literally I sat right back down. It felt like somebody like pushed me over. I sat right back down in the chair, and I go, uh-oh. ran into his restroom, and I threw up for 20 minutes straight.
Yep.
Oh god.
And then I came out like wobbly, and I go, Tim, and I'm like 16, 17 at this point. I go, Tim, I need to go home. And so my brother ended up driving me home, and then he ended up going back. But the funny thing was, is a week later, I was like, I could go for a cigar.
Yeah.
And it's mind blowing because I just puked my guts out.
Yep.
Right.
Smoked a cigar,
Right.
and I'm like after about a week, and literally after that night, I was like, I'll never smoke a cigar. I'll never smoke anything ever again.
Yeah.
And then a week later, I was like, I could go for another.
Yeah.
It's funny. And then I remember sitting down, I met you, and we had a glass of whiskey, we had a cigar, and we just talked. And my best friendships pretty much start around whiskey and cigars. I mean, you came later. And then you came later. I mean, all three of you guys. My first moment of actually sitting down and talking to you guys was around a glass of whiskey and a cigar.
Yeah.
And that's when I got to know you, like actually know you.
Right.
That's when you got to know me. And that's when like we just hashed out everything.
Yeah.
Well, and there's definitely something too of like in a world, a culture where there's so many things, weed is available, any type of drug you can think of. If you grow up with like older men in your life who smoke cigars, where it's not like, they think all of this stuff is bad and all of this stuff is evil. Those are the kids who are probably more likely to go and then get into, stuff that will actually ruin your life. But if you have someone like your dad introduces you to cigars and is like, explains to you why he smokes cigars, but he doesn't smoke weed or doesn't do cocaine or whatever, you're probably not going to have that temptation when you go off to college to be like, this whole sphere was untouched by my family, and it's totally new to me. I want to explore it all.
Your parents set the foundation for you to have the proper knowledge for you to actually know what's happening when you meet a quote-unquote new stimulus, right? Because think about, like, my dad always tells the story, like, the reason why he kind of let me sip his beer growing up is because he was like, the last thing I want you to do is I don't know if you're going to go to parties or not in college. All I know is what I experienced. And he was like, there are numerous kids that, like, growing up through college, my dad went through, like, the fraternity houses through the 70s. And he was like, so many kids died because they were smothered at home with, don't do this, never touch this, never look at this. When it's like, okay, well, yes, there's some of that, like, but you have to explain why. Right? But when it comes to alcohol, if you just do it in moderation, if you do cigars in moderation, you will truly enjoy it. There's an opportunity to enjoy it. And then the things like illicit drugs, like, don't do that. It is severely bad for your health. And the only thing it does is ruin your life, right? So that's setting the foundation for you to make a proper decision when you meet that stimulus head on.
This is a PSA brought to you by the Bourbonists.
You're welcome.
Well, and cigars force you have to do them in moderation, or else you'll be throwing up
You'll
for
get
20
sick.
minutes.
Yeah, right.
100%.
Like you can't just
it teaches patience.
I mean, some people can smoke 4 or 5 cigars a day, but you got to work up to that. And
They built the tolerance for that.
right.
Yeah.
But you can't sit there in an hour and smoke 3 cigars. Like, you just can't.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Well, and so, Grayson, so you said junior year of high school or college when you started getting into them.
Yeah. Yeah, it was college for me.
Well, how did that come about?
I think because I mean, no one in my family like was smoking, so it was never something I even thought I would ever get into.
Yeah.
And I mean, most of the conversation was always around like cigarettes, where I was like, cigarettes bad, never do them. And still to this day, I've never smoked a single cigarette, and I don't ever plan to. But then when I went to college, so I majored in theology. So a lot of my professors would be like, we're having class outside today. He'd be lighting up his pipe. We'd have class. He'd be smoking a pipe while teaching class. Or all of the theology professors would meet at the local pub, and they'd all smoke cigars at night. So kind of through that sphere, I was like, oh, man, I'll try a cigar. It's just tobacco compared to a cigarette that's got 180 filler ingredients, chemicals and crap that's going to, and you're inhaling them, and it becomes an addiction or whatever. So it was just a slow process from there, then, smoking little cigarillos to then working up to bigger cigars. And I had a few moments getting sick.
Yeah.
But one of the nights we smoked together,
Right.
I didn't throw up, but it was like that feeling where you're like, I don't want to smoke again.
You're like, I'm done.
Yeah. It's
And
almost
then-
worse when you don't throw up because you're just like, you got like chills and
sits
you're
there.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your head
you
is
feel like you have
foggy.
the flu.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like worse than the flu.
Well, then, I guess my story is you.
Yeah.
I did. My parents were those same people. They're like never do drugs. My mom was always about like, because they grew up in the 70s and 80s, and my mom was always like, yeah, don't do weed. That was like the big thing. And then of course, like, I think I always had like the wherewithal state of mind of like, okay, so certain drugs you can't do, obviously. Hey, the ones that you can't buy at a supermarket, probably shouldn't do those.
The ones where you got to get from a trunk.
So like my grandparents, both sets smoked for a while. My mom smoked for a while, like cigarettes.
Cigarettes for you?
Yeah, cigarettes for me. Yeah, and it was probably a pack a week. Like it wasn't like horrendous or whatever. But
Right.
then I was dating somebody at the time who was just avidly against it, and so I tried to hide it from her. And then I didn't understand why she would get in my car, and she's like, "You smoked again?" And I'm like, "What? How do you know? There's nothing here." She's like, "It smells
No.
like it, idiot." Like,
Genius.
No,
and
don't.
so she found him, and she would always throw him away, and so I quit after that. And then it wasn't until I got into whiskey, actually, because shout out to like one of my really good friends. His name's Robert, and I worked for him for a while, but he's the one who owned the wood shop. And
Oh,
so
sure,
like
yeah.
he taught me how to do like all this stuff, and he taught me how to build furniture and all this stuff. And then like we would start having business. So he made me his marketing director, and so I'd start having business meetings at his house, and he would pull out some stuff that I'd never seen, but it was in a beautiful bottle, and it looked like apple juice. And I was like, "What is that?" He's like, "Oh, that's whiskey, my friend." And so he got me into that, and he's like, "It's beautiful because," and he would go into these most elaborate stories of like how whiskey is made and how it's like, so wine is 4 ingredients or 4 processes. It's squish the grapes,
Ferment the grapes.
ferment the grapes, let
Take
them
out the skins.
take out the skins and stuff, and then barrel it for a little bit and bottle it. Like it's
Yeah.
4 steps. Whiskey is like 7 or 8 steps, where it's like it's fermentation. You have to grow the grain. You have to like there's so many different. I mean, technically, it was stumbled on by accident by monks because they were trying to figure out medicine. And
Wow.
but like I was watching a documentary I highly recommend. It's called Neat. It's not on Hulu anymore. It ticks me off, but it goes through the process of like there's the 3rd generation distiller at Buffalo Trace, and he was telling this story, and he was like, after the most people who are distillers don't see their 3rd batch of whiskey because it takes about 25
Oh,
years
yeah.
from beginning to end.
Wow.
And to see one batch, right? To a proper batch, right? And that was so beautiful to me because it taught me like it's all about that like patience of change and waiting for things to get to the right stage in order to grow, right? And then so I started drinking whiskey with some buddies and getting into that, and then with him, and that's where my love of all that happened. And then one of my other friends, who's I was in a band with for a while, started getting me into like cigars, and we would randomly smoke here and there, and I thought it was cool. Like it was the aesthetic of it, right? It was sitting around a campfire just talking. And at the time, I was just like, why do I feel sick? You know, like I'd go through an entire cigar in like half an hour, and I'm like, my stomach doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever threw up from a cigar, but it was close. But then I was working at a gym. Well, technically it was like a community center, but I was one of their sales reps, and I became really good friends with this retired surgeon, and his name was Lori, and he came in, and he would always talk to me about how he loved smoking his pipes. That was his after-day treat. He would be in surgery for hours, and he would go home and just suck on a pipe, and like that was his thing. So I went out, I bought a pipe, and I started smoking pipes. And I would always get like weird looks because I'd bring a pipe to a bar with a friend, and the bartender would be like, "Pipe, really?" I'm like, "Shut up." leave
It's
me
like
alone."
so 1930s.
Right, exactly. But I loved the aesthetic of it, and
Oh,
oh
for
my gosh,
sure.
you think cigars take forever? You have to like treat pipes so they don't go out.
Yeah.
Like
I'm
there's
terrible at it.
there is such a nuance to getting that right. And then as soon as I started getting it right, he came into my office one day, Lori did, and he goes, "Hey, you like pipes?" I was like, "Because of you, yeah." And he was like, "All right, cool. Well, my doctor said I can't smoke anymore." I'm like, "Well, you're 85, so you probably shouldn't." And,
Or you should. You're about to die anyways.
Yeah, go ahead.
And he was like, "My doctor said I can't smoke anymore. Do you like pipes?" I was like, "Yes." And he goes, "Okay, here." And he handed me a bag, and there was probably $2,000 worth of hand-carved pipes in there. And that's the display that I have
Oh, that's
upstairs.
awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
And he just gave them to me, and he was like, "You might want to clean them. I sucked on those a lot." And I was like, "Can you say that in a different way, please?" Like, can you not? I don't want to sit and picture you gumming these pipes because I don't ever want to use them. So I went home and scrubbed the crap out of them. But I started using them. And then when my son Gideon was going to be born, so I had a what's called a diaper party, and my wife insisted on inviting you.
Right.
And I was like, "But you used to have a crush on this guy. I don't want to invite him to my house." And she's like, "Why?" And I was like, "It's a man thing. He's a threat. Shut up."
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it. And so I was like, "No, I don't want to invite him. He's a threat." And she's like, "We're getting married. Shut up." Like, he's not a threat. And so, or I think we were already married at that point.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, it was, of course. Yeah, we were already married. And so it's like, what threat do you think anyway, so it was this whole thing. I was like, fine, just bring him over. And you came over, and you were the sharpest dressed dude I've ever seen in my life come to just a party. And my dad was there, and he looked at me, he goes, "What decade did this guy crawl out of?" And he was, I mean, dressed to the nines. You had slacks, you had nice shoes, you had a button-up shirt. And I was like, we're drinking and playing bags, right? Like, this isn't... And you handed me a Bovita packet, like one of those, that green pouch. And you were like, "I don't know if you're a cigar guy, but here's these. These are some of my favorites." And you gave me the Banker and 2 Brick Houses.
Yeah. I think there were 5 cigars in there. I think I gave you a La Gloria,
Yes, that was, we smoked that
man.
together
Banker,
later.
2
Yeah.
Those are all
Brick
good
Houses,
ones.
and a 5th one, which I can't think what it was.
I don't
now.
remember.
Oh, Perdomo. Perdomo,
Yeah.
95, I think, or 40. I don't forget what it is now. Perdomo something.
But I remember that night, I was outside, and I was getting ready to light up a pipe, and my friend Scotty was smoking the pipe with me. And you were like, "You should try one of those cigars. We should smoke one." And I was like, "Well, let's do it right now." And at that point, I had already gained, like, you had already gained my respect. Just like you were the nicest guy. And all my stipulations and anxiety went out the window. And I was like, "Well, I guess I'll keep this guy around." And I smoked that with you. And I remember after like halfway through the cigar, party foul, you ashed the table. Well, it's better than ashing yourself, right?
Yeah, Grayson.
Got a battle scar. It's impressive.
But I remember about halfway through that, it was so creamy.
Yeah.
It was so delicious. It was just a brick house. It was so delicious, and I was like, "Oh, I'm into cigars now." And then, like,
It was
our
a
friendship
switch,
blossomed
yeah.
from there.
Yeah.
And I remember the night that we really got to know each other, we met at the local cigar bar, Aiello's. And I remember sitting in there, and I was like, "I'll take a decade," which is like a big Churchill Maduro, like strong
Rocky
cigar.
Patel?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rocky Patel decade. And I smoked through half of it in about 10 minutes. And I looked at him, and he goes, "You all right?" And I was like, "Can we go sit outside?" So we had to step outside for a second. And then, but ever since then, I was like, this is something to be admired. Like, and now I have quite the collection of cigars, and it's just kind of become a part of who I am when I need to be, who I am when I need to be me the most. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, it is a part of who I am when I need to be me the most. But yeah, it was all because of you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm honored.
Well, and I think what Joseph has done to you, to me, and to Grayson, to all of us, like, is shown us the beauty of sharing it, right? Because you weren't expecting, and it's the beauty of going. It's the beauty of what the documentary Neat talks about. It's you're giving yourself you're giving a part of yourself without any expectation of return.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's that complete humility and selflessness that it's what draws me back to bourbon. It's what draws me to cigars. Like, the reason why I get cigars and the reason why I get great cigars is to share them with you guys, to share them with my brother, to share them with
Right.
anybody who's going to enjoy it. Because it's the beauty of sharing and giving yourself.
I mean,
it is a communal thing versus like, no one's like, hey, I picked up these cigarettes at the gas station. You want a couple? Like, it's
Want to
like,
share some Chestertons?
yeah, that's not like a wow. Like,
I got some Pall
what a
Malls in my
generous,
trunk.
what a generous gift. You
I
know,
got
it's
some
like,
Camels. Do you want to share?
Well, because what's neat about cigars is, like, it's not just the cigar. It's also you buy a humidor that you have to season and take care of. You have to age the cigars. You have to monitor them. And so when you're passing along a cigar, it's something that you've invested time and thought into, and you bought them at a certain price. You've aged them, but there's a lot of work. There's a lot of back end work that goes into
You've
it.
committed to
Well,
it.
you're describing a good friendship.
Right. And so then you give a little token, to a buddy that you're smoking with, and from it comes a great conversation, or just a great, even if you talk for 5 minutes during that whole cigar, you just sit in silence for most of it. It still isn't time wasted.
No.
Because I mean, for guys, we have thoughts that we mull over, and there's something about a cigar that creates this contemplative environment. I mean, I enjoy cigars by myself. I have no problem smoking by myself. But there is something really great to smoke with somebody else, and you get to talk about it and share it. And there's something about the atmosphere. I mean, even just a smoky atmosphere it's pleasant. I mean, like, you
smells
go to
great.
like a mass, a Catholic mass. It has incense. There's something about that smoke, rising up to heaven. It's like your prayers, and it's the same thing with cigars. That kind of emulate that a little bit. It's you can let some of your problems go, and there's something about smoke. I mean, it's the same thing with like a campfire. You sit around a campfire and you're just looking at this, at the flame. It's relaxing. It's contemplative. It's something. It's warm visually,
It creates
and physically.
It creates that kind of almost a mysterious ambiance
Yeah.
to where it helps you just kind of let go.
Yeah.
Well, let go, but also process.
Yeah.
And I think as you process things, you start trimming the fat of your problems. And
But cigars are, the ironic thing about cigars is it's both, you're a collector, but
Yeah.
not like your typical collector where, everything just sits on the shelf forever. You actually burn through your collection slowly.
right.
So, which is kind of a good thing because, like, this life is a temporary life.
Yeah. That's
You
right.
don't want to hold on to material things. So
Right.
cigars, it's like, this is my favorite cigar. I've been aging for 5 years, but I'm going to smoke it, and it's going to be gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like-
Yeah.
I love it, but not enough to, like, hold on to it for my whole life.
Right. I mean, I have a friend, Phil Howard, shout out dude, because he's the one who, like, I think stepped it up to the next level for my appreciation of cigars, because he's a wizard, dude. Like, he knows anything and everything. And he handed me, like, he showed me a cigar room once. I was at a party at his house, and he had one of those, like, 3,000 unit, like, big old cabinets, and it was beautiful, and he had a room set up and everything. I'm like, can I live here? And he was like, well, no, but I'll give you some. And he talked to me about, we talked for hours. And he was just like, this is important because of this, and this one tastes like this because of this, and I hand rolled this one by myself. Like, I did this myself. I actually have one upstairs. I haven't smoked it yet. And it was just such, like, the light that came to his eyes, and I sound like a little schoolgirl going to Disney for the first time, but that's kind of what it was like. He was just like, this is something that I truly enjoy, and I want to share it with it. Like, he was so happy and joyful to just share it with me. He didn't care if I was listening or not. That was it's his passion. And, like, so he handed me a couple, and he was like, this one's from Cuba. You can have that. There's another Cuban. You can have that. And then this is one of the greatest ones I've ever had in my life, and they don't make them anymore, so smoke it on a good occasion. That one I smoked when my son Ben was born. It was outstanding. He called it the Shark. It was from Arturo Fuente.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was a little Lancero. Or no, it wasn't a Lancero. It was a Torpedo. And it was...
The Añejo, I think. The
Yeah,
Añejo
the
Shark.
Añejo, yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, it was out. That's dude pulling it out of the pocket. That's awesome.
Grayson's good.
But it was outstanding. And but I mean, and like, I feel like out of the four of us, I might be the most experienced with like the whiskey side of things. I don't know. I think we kind of separated properly. I think you and I are a blend of both, and then you're
Probably.
more cigars,
Yeah.
and then you're more whiskey. If I'm speaking
I think that's accurate.
accurately,
Yeah.
and like, but my love of this stuff is just like I still get people to this day because I've got a big display in my my living room of like my bar and like all my bottles and stuff. And I remember being a part of like getting on like Facebook groups and stuff for the first time and showing a picture of like what I had and everything. And I remember somebody commenting once, they were like, why are half of them gone? And I'm like, and I commented right back and I was like, why do you keep yours? What are you doing? What are you showing off? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
No, I didn't say, what are you showing off? I didn't say that to him, but like, I was like, what? It's meant to be drank. It's meant to be enjoyed. Like, I don't hunt bourbon for, so I can put it on a shelf and it gathers dust.
Just to say you got it.
Right. Oh, I got this one. Check it out. Those guys.
But what does it taste like?
In the bourbon community,
I
we
don't
call
know.
those
I've never tried
taters. The guys who hunt for the ones that are only hard to get, and then they keep them on a shelf. We call those guys taters. You know, the ones who like walk into Deerbergs every week and they're like, "What do you have at the back?" You're like, leave the people alone, man. It's a grocery store.
Well, I think to Grayson's point, like all these things, it's meant to be enjoyed, and I think if you don't enjoy it, I think pride can enter into it. You just bought it to brag about it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's the proper way to enjoy and appreciate cigars and whiskey. It should be enjoyed. It should be shared.
Because at the end of the day, it's just a material thing, and it's meant to serve a higher purpose. Like, oh, you just got married. We're gonna give you a Davidoff sampler.
Right.
Right.
Well, I worked with
And then you're gonna smoke them
Yeah.
to remember your marriage. Like,
Yeah.
right.
It's for a higher purpose.
No, I worked with a alcoholic, and it was sad because I was hearing him talk about alcohol, and I'm like, I don't think you ever actually enjoyed it. You consumed it, you used it, to get drunk, to keep a constant buzz, but I don't think you really enjoyed it. Whereas like for me, and I for all of us, we can enjoy these things, and then it's gone, and we might never find the bottle again, but that's okay because we bought it not to get drunk off of, but to appreciate it. It's like an artist that paints this beautiful painting, and you buy it, and then you stick it in your art gallery, or you stick it in your back room where you keep all your other art pieces, and you never display them. It's like
it's meant to be seen.
It's meant to
Right.
be displayed and enjoyed, and
Yeah.
experienced in a sense. And that's another big reason why I love cigars. Is just there's something very masculine about it. There's a harshness to it that you have to kind of get over, and then you have to find depth in it, and care for it, and in a sense pursue it, because you can't just buy a cigar and throw it in a box and let it sit there forever. If you
Right.
don't take care of that box, the cigar is just going to be wasted. So kind of like with marriage, you pursue a woman, you marry the woman, but that's not the end of it. You have to take care of her, cultivate this relationship. You have to care for that.
Notice how everything you just said, the intention's focused on the other person.
Right.
The intention
yeah.
is focused on marriage. Your focus is on your wife, right? If your intention in going into a marriage is me, you're a
Right.
tyrant. You're like a king who only stores all the wealth for yourself. Whereas same with cigars and whiskey, right? The beauty of the makers is because, especially with whiskey, cigars not so much, but whiskey, they don't get to try a lot of their whiskey that they make.
Yeah.
And so the intention is on the people who buy it.
Yeah.
And especially when your intention is, okay, well, I'm buying it to use it to serve a higher purpose. And once it's done, I'm going to let it go. The cool thing is that opens up room for you to have another one, maybe a better one. Maybe even so you're letting go of the past, and you're making room for something potentially better to come in.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Well, and Adam, this is like to your point where you're talking about whether it's wine or whiskey or cigars or whatever. the more you understand like the amount of work that's gone into this thing, especially like certain bourbons that have been aged 15 plus years, the more you don't want to just be like, oh, I'm going to just throw 3 shots of this back and get drunk off of it. It's like, you know, that kind of spoils the art and the craft that went into it. You want to take your time and really taste the flavors and what went into making that thing. Yep. Same with cigars. And the more you like it, the more you're like despise when you see people doing that. Like, you're not even paying attention to that thing, and you should be smoking that as slowly as you possibly can to get as much out of it as possible.
I don't think I 100% agree. And I have a friend, God love him. I'm not going to say his name because he'll probably listen to this, but I had a friend so we went on a bourbon hunt probably like a month after I met you, which was awesome. But the 3 of us did was it last year or the year before?
I think it was last.
It was last March.
Yeah, it was over a year.
Yeah, I think it was last March, right after I got married. Or no. Oh God. Nope. I've been married 2 years. It was last year. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it over Thanksgiving break or something?
No, it was March. It
was
around
March.
March.
Early spring.
Yeah.
Or but late winter.
But we hit up this spot in northern Illinois. Well, no, it was mid Illinois. It was like I think it was Effingham, and there's this little place called A1, and they had like some of the most unique bourbons and scotches and like stuff. And I brought one and I was like, I've never heard of this. And he goes, that's because they don't make it anymore. And I was like, dude, I'll take one. And he goes, cool, $35. And I was like, what? You're not like gouging me because they don't make it anymore? He goes, no, take it and enjoy it. That's MSRP. Take it. Yeah. Right? And which I don't know what MSRP stands for, but basically just means what it should be priced at. But it was Basil Hayden, their rum cask. So it was made from Canadian rye, American rye, and rum. And they don't make it anymore. And I have still a little bit of it upstairs, but I have a friend who loves rum. And he's not a bourbon guy. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, then you can try this whiskey that's like finished with rum a little bit. And it's, and it was very sweet. It was mild, but it was sweet. It was good. And I poured him a Glencairn of it, and he goes to like shoot it, and I'm like, stop. And he was like, what, am I doing something wrong? I go, yes. And so he sipped it, and he was like, oh, that's good. And then he took it and poured it into a Diet Pepsi, and I had to leave the room. I was so angry. And he was like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like,
get out of my house.
It's supposed to be enjoyed, man. Like, they don't make that anymore. But that's right. I love him to death. I do, but it was
punch you in the throat.
Hey, what time we got on there, Daniel? How much are we going on the recorder?
1 hour 11.
Okay.
Probably about time to wrap her up.
Wait, did we hear how you got into cigars, Dan?
Kinda. Smoked paper.
Smoked paper.
Oh, yeah.
Smoked paper. Smoked cigar with my brother. Threw it for 20 minutes straight.
Right, yeah.
And then honestly, I ended up smoking, I think, one more time with my brother. Borderline threw up again that day because I still didn't learn don't inhale it. Right. And then it was with you, and it was over a brick house. Yeah. And it's kind of the same with me and bourbon. Like, I grew up with bourbon, doing Jack and Cokes. And I was about 296 pounds going through freshman year of college, and I was slamming Jack and Cokes. And I was like, hey, you know what? I kind of need to lose weight. Let's lose the Coke. So I started drinking Jack straight.
The bourbon.
Yes. No ice. And then, because that was also kind of like with cigars, like I was like, well, men only drink bourbon neat.
Right.
And so I started drinking Jack, of all things, neat. And I was like, this kind of stinks. And then my brother goes, here, let me actually give you a decent whiskey. And it was Woodford Reserve.
Oh, nice.
And I drank it neat. And I go, oh, my gosh, whiskey actually can taste good, and I don't have to shoot it.
Yep.
Right.
And then that just opened up the floodgates. And it's kind of the same with the brick house. Like, I was like, oh, cigars don't just taste like earth. And it doesn't just burn. Like, there's actual flavors to it, and it can actually be pleasant. Right. And it was also, but it was the camaraderie, which I think sold it.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the taste. Like, now I can actually sit back and enjoy a cigar by myself, enjoy the taste, and I do like a lot of my praying and reading when I have a cigar. But
see, contemplative.
Yeah,
it is, yeah,
absolutely. And I think the nicotine helps with that. But
maybe
it's the camaraderie that we had the first time I had a good cigar and I had even better camaraderie and better friendship with it. And that's what sold it.
Yeah.
Because now, like, I would much rather have, especially if I'm having a good cigar, I'd much rather have it with great friends and great camaraderie, right? I almost feel like if I have a good cigar on my own, it's a waste. Like, I'm not going to smoke crap. But I'm more willing to smoke some of my cheaper stuff by myself. But when I get a good stick, I'm going to buy 3 others to share with you guys, or I'm going to buy 1 other to get my brother. Like, I'm
Right.
always
Yeah.
getting not just one
Yep.
of a great cigar or a good cigar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cigars have really come back because our father's generation, they had no idea, but generally speaking, they didn't have any idea about the beauty of cigars. You know, they would throw them in a wood box that was dried out, and the cigars would be harsh and, you know, just horrible to smoke. But they smoked them, you know, and I'd be curious to find out what the enjoyment was. I think for them it was just the aesthetics. But cigars have really come back, especially in our generation. The cigar market has skyrocketed. All these new rollers, you know, are coming out with these amazing blends. And they're recognizing the beauty and the mystery behind cigars. You know, there's so much that goes into a cigar. You know, one cigar can change year to year. You know,
Yeah.
how much rain the soil got, how much sun the leaves got, you know, how much nutrients are in the soil. So many things go into a cigar. And it's kind of sad because, like, there's a cigar that I loved. It's La Gloria Series N, and they don't make it anymore. But that cigar opened up my world to cigars. Like, and my brother Daniel and I smoked that, and we paired it with a whiskey. What was it? Old Pulteney. That's what it was. Old Pulteney. And I remember we sat out in the garage and we smoked the Gloria Series N with Old Pulteney, and it was the most amazing experience that we ever had with a cigar. And it's sad that they don't make the cigar anymore. Or you can find them, but it's on auction. It's hard to find. I have 2 left in my humidor. I have no idea when I'm gonna smoke them. Probably with you, Daniel. But you know, but it's to what you were saying, Grayson. Like, it's temporary. You know, it's kind of sad, but it's also just part of life. It's a great lesson to just keep in mind of, like, this is great. It's also temporary. It's going to pass, and that's okay. You know, learning to be okay with that is a good lesson to learn. You know, it takes discipline. It takes, you know, maybe a little bit of grieving, but then there's something else to look forward to as well. I think there's a hierarchy as well. You know, like our parents enjoyed it for a very base reason. They enjoyed the smoke and perhaps just the experience of it. We're enjoying it because of the flavor and the care that goes into it, the work that it takes to preserve the cigar. You know, it's neat just to see that hierarchy, that it gets better with age.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's the perfect way to end this, because, or at least our first foundational episode. Here's to getting better with age.
Amen
Cheers.
to that.
Amen.
Gentlemen, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, boys.